1989, and I got here without much means. I had $1,000 in my pocket. I knew about 3 people in San Francisco, but I was really drawn by this city, its creativity and its history, the beat culture, the rock and roll culture, Ashbury, all of that was what drew me here. I always saw it as a place of great creativity and a place where you can actually invent and reinvent yourself. And I think that's the draw for San Francisco for a lot of people, which is really exciting, and I think that's the idea of this city for people, not just in this country, but all over the world, and why I think people want to come here. When I was running for supervisor in District 11, I was knocking on a lot of doors, and I was really amazed at how many people I saw in that district who were artists. Sculptors, painters, photographers, writers, poets, musicians, people who made their own instruments. And what we saw, but my district, District 11, it's the Excelsior District, it's the Lakeview neighborhood, proper Amazon, it's the south central part of San Francisco. Not very well known for having a lot of artists. And it's kind of viewed as a bedroom community for a lot of people in the city. People actually do their artwork or do their work outside the district. They come home and they go back to the district. Well, from that experience of meeting so many people, it seemed to me that we need to be able to create our own grassroots-based arts programming in the district. And you can talk about restructuring San Francisco and making sure you have equity in their arts programming all over the city, but if you're not fostering people making connections at the local level, at the neighborhood level, you can try and make plans, but you're not going to be able to bring people forward to access funding for the arts programs that the city can provide. So I think one thing that people need to do is be able to look at how we can foster just the connections of artists that actually are out there, have come to San Francisco in the communities. Then you can overlay that, the structures of the city. We have, I reviewed the Arts Task Force report, and actually was briefed on it back in 2006, and it was very meaningful to me. And one of the things that, one of the recommendations that have come out of that is combining the Arts Commission with grants for the arts, the Film Commission, and looking at how to have a layer of Office of Economic and Workforce Development. I believe that's the right way to go. Arts are an economic engine. If it's an attraction for people coming to San Francisco, it's also a way that we can stimulate the economy. And so I've looked at, I think as mayor, I want to bring those institutions together and think about how we can realign how we do funding so we can support the neighborhood artists, the organizations that provide neighborhood arts all across San Francisco. And we need to help, local supervisors and local neighbors and residents to be able to foster the arts within their communities. And I think it's a dual process, structuring government on one side, but also making sure we can recognize the great talents that we have in San Francisco on the other. And I've seen the difference that arts have made in the communities. There's a young man I know named Anthony Lopez, who was a tagger and a poet, and he was a great artist and he was a great poet, but he didn't have any support really to get to the next level. And if there was an organization like Out of Sight Youth Arts that existed in District 11 back in the day, he probably could have made a better go of his life. On the other hand, another neighbor of mine, Eric Norberg, who's a great muralist, and he was a tagger as well, and he was a poet as well. He had access through his family to through Brasida Eyes and their programming, that he had greater privileges that way to get that. He's an internationally known artist. So we need to be thinking about how we can foster support for young artists all across the city. I think restructuring the Arts Commission, combining these programming together and looking at how we can really nurture neighborhood arts is definitely the way to go. We also need to recognize that there are different, institutions, art institutions in the city. You have major institutions like the symphony, the opera, and they do provide, great catalysts for arts and learning. And they need to be, have a part of what the pie is. But I want to make sure that we're also providing, real strong funding for the organizations that and the individual artists that are big part of the drives to this city. And I think if we're actually going to be able to foster, I've actually sponsored 4 neighborhood art walk events in my district without any city funding. We've done all through volunteers. If we're going to be able to foster greater commercial development in our neighborhood commercial corridors, we have to be able to look at how we can do that through supporting our neighborhood artists. They're a big draw to our commercial corridors. We've had our art walk events having combined youth arts, arts from seniors, poets, musicians, and they've been very, very successful events. We should be able to have those things as ongoing events that continue for lengths of time, that longer than we've been able to do it so far. And I'm very proud of that work, and I think that the city has a lot to offer in terms of assuring that we have a vibrant program.
Thank you. Supervisor Chiu, a follow-up question for Supervisor Avalos.
First of all, I just want to thank you for having us here tonight and for taking part in this discussion about the future of artists and the arts in San Francisco. And I should probably also start off by saying that John and I, over the last few years, we've had a number of conversations about what we want to see for this community. And I think we share an awful lot as far as what vision we have for the role that arts has in San Francisco. And I think we probably have spent the most time of all the candidates thinking about this. So, easy question for John, what would be the first thing that you would want to do as mayor to move forward an arts agenda in San Francisco?
Well, I'd probably convene hopefully, I know there's a lot of members of the Arts Task Force are still around, and probably bring them back into the room to look at how we can start enacting some of the recommendations that come out of the task force. Probably looking at also the structure within the Arts Commission and grants for the arts. Just in reviewing the task force recommendations, I was looking at, well, is this going to take a charter amendment? I think it might take a charter amendment to combine some of these functions. There was a recommendation I've heard about adding the library commission as well, and I'm not sure that's a charter mandated function. So how we can look at legally what we need to do to be able to combine these functions. But I think pulling together the Arts Task Force members who I believe whose voices have not been adequately heard by the mayor's office, bring them in to ensure that they are adequately heard, that we can enact the recommendations that they have that will provide a lot of support for artists and organizations that do art in neighborhoods that are in vital need of art. And we can attract ways of stimulating our economy, bring in new tourism with our arts programming. These are all the things that I would like to do to initiate my work as mayor of San Francisco.
Thank you, Supervisor Avalos. Supervisor Chiu, same question. Would you like me to repeat the question?
I think I got it. So again, thank you for having us here tonight. And let me start by talking about my own personal connection to the arts. And someone here asked me the question of whether it's true if I have been cited playing the electric violin on the stage of the Red Devil Lounge. And the answer to that, I guess if you Google it, apparently it does come up. It is true. From when I was in 3rd grade for almost a decade, I was a musician. My dad, who immigrated, actually the first kid in my family born here in the United States, handed me a violin when I was in 3rd grade. It was a tiny little violin, which I played for the next 12 years or so. And I played the piano, the cello, and the violin. And through much of my high school years and my early college years, played in pit orchestras, in weddings, in symphonies, in various gigs. And to be perfectly honest, if I had been a little better at the violin, I probably would not be sitting here in front of you as an elected official. Music has been an incredibly important part of my life, and I know actually it's an important part of John's life as well. And to me, the arts in San Francisco is not just about supporting a community of individuals who are artists. I think our city, I think every great city, needs to have at its heart a commitment to the arts because it's important for economic development. It's important for attracting tourists. It's important for cultivating our next generation of young kids, making sure that we're investing in arts education so that we are pushing the creativity of our next generation. It's important for public safety. When we have beautiful spaces, studies show that crime diminishes, just as when there are broken windows, we know that crime increases. Every facet of our city can be affected by the arts. And so I think this conversation is really not just about, in my mind, sort of a narrow segment of a population or a narrow set of issues. It's really, how do we ensure that this is a set of values that really inculcates throughout the entire city? Vinay's question, I think, touches on a number of things which I will talk about. I think we all understand and agree that in recent years, funding to our artists and the opportunity for artists to actually live here in San Francisco has gotten much, much more difficult because of, I think, bad or misguided policy decisions. So, for example, Vinay talked about the cultural centers and cultural grants. And we know in recent years, our cultural centers have been whacked from a budget standpoint. And in fact, several months ago, a number of folks from this room came to my office and said that the API and queer cultural centers had received zero funding. And this is why I put in the one add back into this year's budget process to make sure that we provided some level of funding back to those institutions. We have known in recent years that the percentage of grants that San Francisco provides to local artists has been diminishing. In my first year in office, I actually asked this question of Luis Cancel. He didn't exactly know the answer. I asked him again. At a second hearing, he said, probably in the 20s or 30s. And I said, wait a second. 20-30% of our city's grants are awarded to our local artists. The rest of these grants go to what he referred to as the national artists, the international artists. And he really fought any suggestion that we needed to think about providing grants to our local talented artists. I asked him a lot of questions, might have embarrassed him a little bit on the pages of the Examiner and the Chronicle. And lo and behold, when he came in front of the Budget Committee this year, that number is up in the 60s. But as I said at that hearing, I'm really proud, Mr. Cancel, that your numbers are up in the 60s. What are we going to do to keep it there? And I suggested, and I think something we may want to think about, is just as last year we passed a piece of legislation that John co-sponsored, that John championed, that I helped to co-sponsor around local hiring. I think we need to consider some sort of policy where we provide our local artists with some percentage of the grants that we have. I think that's only fair. Now, to touch upon a couple other aspects of your question, I am absolutely in favor of merging the San Francisco Arts Commission and Grants for the Arts. We need one unified office. We have a huge bureaucracy in San Francisco in every part of government. 15 departments that regulate the business community, 14 workforce development programs, 3 child care agencies, and 2 arts agencies. And we need to merge these things so that we can really focus and figure out what our priorities are. And I think there are many things that such an office should do. We need to make sure we're coordinating with other departments. We need to make sure that we're working with diverse communities. We need to make sure we're fostering economic development. And we need to make sure that our artists are being taken care of. And apparently my time is up, but I look forward to continuing that conversation.
Supervisor Avalos, follow-up question?
Just what would you do to assure that neighborhood artists are getting the support they need to be able to do their work?
I think we have to think about arts in our neighborhoods. So whether this be, for example, making sure that we have a neighborhood-based arts program that has artists in residences at different facilities, whether it be making sure that we're expanding our cultural centers to house artists here and to make sure that folks know that this is a center and a hub, not just where artists reside, but where we can educate the next generation in arts, whether it be moving forward a program that I've been an early champion of, which is Art in the Storefront, using vacant storefronts in difficult merchant quarters, freeing them up for artists. This is something that has worked extremely well in a number of more challenged neighborhoods in San Francisco, something I completely support. I think that the vision that we have right now, for example, in the mid-market Tenderloin area is a fascinating one, and one that I support. We are trying to attract innovation and artists. We are bringing in Twitter and Burning Man to bring in that creativity in the business and technological fields, along with the creativity of the arts. These types of synergies on top of each other, in my mind, this is what cities are really wonderful at. And this is something that I would be very interested in helping to cultivate. In my time as a district supervisor, I represent the northeast part of the city. we have moved forward with a number of programs to really cultivate neighborhood-based art. So whether it be, for example, Arts in the Alleyway in the heart of Chinatown, where we have some of the most interesting and some of the oldest alleyways in the city, whether it be the Lower Polk Art Walk that I helped to sponsor last Thursday night on Polk Street, a street that has a tremendously rich history. There are now murals on most blocks in Polk Street. We're trying to capture some of what the Mission has been able to do with their mural program to bring that to another part of town where we are attracting more and more folks. Again, this is good for community, it's good for public safety, it's good for economic development. There are so many things we do when we allow arts to flourish in our neighborhoods.
Thank you for that question. The next question that